Hello everyone, and welcome to your first week of Survey of Women and Gender Studies. This week, what's expected of you is to review the course content. I've posted our syllabus, a discussion forum rubric, which is I'd like you guys all to review. It shows you exactly how you're going to be graded in our discussion forums, which is where your participation grade comes from. And also a course introduction video with attached slides. So please make sure you've reviewed all of that as soon as possible and let me know if you have any questions. Next, I'd like you to read Chapter 1 of Women's Studies, Perspectives and Practices. I realize that there's some bookstore issues that a lot of you aren't able to get the book, so I did post a PDF of Chapter 1 which may have some issues, so I'm going to post a new version of it tomorrow when I'm on campus. Please review that chapter, read it carefully. I'm also going to discuss the content in that chapter in this video to help you, just like we would in a lecture, a real brief lecture on the content, to help you read through it and get ready for your discussion forum. I'd also like you to participate in the 2 discussion forums we have for this week. We're going to post first in the introduction discussion forum where I'd like you to talk about yourself. A lot of you have already done so. You're doing a great job there. And I'd also like you to not only just post about yourself, but to interact with your colleagues. So all of our classmates are posting, and I'd like you to read them all, and I can tell who's reading what. So read them all and respond to each other. It's meant as a place to get to know each other. I'd also like you to participate in our second discussion forum, which is about Chapter 1. And this asks, what is feminism? What is women's studies? So after you've read the chapter and taken notes, and after you've reviewed this video, please go back and do that discussion as well. It's really important that you do so before it gets too close to the end of the week, because if you post the very last day, no one will be able to interact with what you've posted, including me. Finally, I did have a journal due for this week, but unfortunately D2L's journal functionality is down this week, so you do not have to write a journal this week, but you will start having to write one beginning next week. So let's start with Chapter 1, Women's Studies, Perspectives, and Practices. The number one question we're going to be looking at in this class is, what is women's studies? Women's studies is an interdisciplinary academic field that's devoted to topic gender and feminism. What women's studies examines is all disciplines and bodies of knowledge to make sure that they are inclusive of all genders and experiences. Women's studies also involves the study of gender as a central aspect of our human experience. Now, a fact that you may not all be aware of is not so long ago, if you took a literature course, you wouldn't have had a single book on your syllabus by a female author, let alone an African American author or a Native American author, or you wouldn't even have me as your professor because I am female. And most of you who are in this class are female, and you wouldn't even be in college. So there's a lot of things that were examined, a lot of work that women's studies and many other movements have done to our academic system to make it a much more inclusive environment. Women's studies and the women's movement. The second wave of the women's movement, we're going to talk about the first wave in just a few moments, but the second wave began in the 1960s and the 1970s. This was a time when formal and informal inequities that affected women in the workplace and their families and their reproductive freedom were really challenged and thought about and refigured. So many women came together to examine all of these things. It was based on a commitment to personal change, so an idea that I can change myself, a commitment to societal change, so I'm not only going to try to change myself, I'm going to try to change the community around me, and the sharing of personal experiences to understand their broader social context. This is where the saying that you're going to hear again in this class, that the personal is political, came about. The idea that a lot of women would get together and talk about the fact that
they had full-time jobs and then came home and had another full-time job of taking care of the family. These ideas of sharing that kind of knowledge and wanting to act upon it was a big part of the women's movement. So women's rights in the United States didn't begin with just the second wave. It began with the first wave. And there's three real milestones that I want you to be aware of when you're thinking about this. The first was one of the first books written by a woman about the rights of women. It was written by Mary Wollstonecraft. And here's a quote from her. "It would be an endless task to trace the variety of meannesses, cares, and sorrows into which women are plunged by the prevailing opinion that they were created rather to feel than to reason, and that all the power they obtain must be obtained by their charms and weaknesses." The second about is
the Seneca Falls Convention of 1848. The idea for this convention, which is where a lot of the ideas of the rights of women were created in the United States, the idea for this started from the experiences of Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Lucretia Mott when they were at the World Anti-Slavery Convention in London. They had done all this work for this cause, and they were not allowed to enter the conference. They were put behind a curtain and not allowed to walk in or be a part of the conference. And that really upset them. And so they decided right then and there that they had to do something to make their lives and the lives of the women around them better. And after 8 years of planning, they were able to create the Seneca, with a lot of other help, they were able to create the Seneca Falls Convention of 1948. Finally, I want you to think about Susan B. Anthony. You may have seen her on our coins. She fought for women's suffrage for her entire lifetime. She fought for our right to vote. And she died 14 years before women were granted the right to vote in 1920. So what does women's studies have to do with feminism? Feminism supports equal justice for all women and seeks to eliminate systems of inequality. Feminism is inclusive and affirming of women. It celebrates women's achievements and struggles and works to provide a positive and affirming stance towards women and womanhood. Feminism also comes in many forms that we're going to be talking about. Some of those are radical, liberal, and multiracial. That word feminism is a battered word. It's one you've probably heard before in your lifetime. A lot of people have brought up in the last decade or two the question of, are we post-feminism? Have all the rights of women been achieved? And this is something that women in our discipline, people who study women's studies, do not think all has been achieved. That is something we'll be considering in this class. Another thing that is a really important thing to think about these days is the role of feminism in our capitalist society these days. For example, the idea that personal style can be mistaken for personal freedom. The idea that anti-feminism and trying to discredit feminism has come up a great deal as well. And the 5 main complaints of anti-feminism are that feminists are just angry women that are whining about their lives, that feminists are men-hating, that feminists just don't like men, which is not true. There's plenty of there's plenty of women who love men, myself included, but also there's plenty of men who are also feminists. The idea that all feminists are lesbians, this is not true. There's there's all different types of feminists, and not all lesbians are feminists. The idea that feminism rejects motherhood, and this is also very untrue, given that feminism fights for the rights of mothers and is very much in support of motherhood. And also that feminism is just a white middle-class movement that doesn't really fight for the rights of people of different races and people of different
like third world countries, that it doesn't spread to encompass a universal idea of feminism. And that's something that's been really addressed in the third wave of feminism, which has come about since the 1990s. The idea of really expanding feminism to be a universal sisterhood. So that's just a real short introduction to what we're reading for this week. I just want to give you kind of a highlight of what's coming next week. I'm going to give this at the beginning, in these little mini lectures I'm going to do for you guys. Next week, we're going to be reading the readings found in Chapter 1. Those are found on pages 23 through 40. Plus, I'm going to have a handout posted under content called Politics of Location. It's by Adrienne Rich. We're going to have a couple of discussion forums about these texts, and we will have a journal entry, hopefully. We'll be able to use our journal, and that'll be due at the end of the week. We will also have we'll begin working on our first assignment, and I will give you all those details next week. So please contact me if you have any questions. I'm really excited about working with all of you guys. Welcome to our class.